Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into an absolutely stunning piece of source material, the book Ghosts of Memory. And I have to say, this book, it just fundamentally challenges everything we think we know about the past. I mean, you should probably forget the whole idea of memory as some kind of mental filing cabinet,
Yeah,
where you pull out these clear, static events when you need them.
right.
The premise here is genuinely radical. It treats memory as something that's relational, alive, and active right now in the present moment.
And crucially, it suggests memory exists long before we even have language for it, before we can interpret it or build a story around it.
It's really just an invitation to notice.
That's it. The author argues that memory arrives first as an atmosphere, or as a rhythm, a specific kind of pressure on the body. It's much less about recalling what happened and way more about feeling how it happened.
And how that feeling's still shaping you today.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is how this kind of memory colors everything.
Mm.
Our reactions, our relationships, even the way a room feels when we walk into it. And it does all this before our rational minds can even start to build a narrative to explain why we feel that way.
So, if you're someone who is intensely curious about your own internal responses, like why you pause when other people move forward or why some situations just feel so much heavier than they should, then this deep dive is definitely for you. Our mission here is to explore how this whole approach, which is really focused on quiet recognition rather than explanation or resolution, how it fundamentally changes how you view your past, your present, and even the path you're walking towards.
Let's jump in.
Okay, let's start with the deepest layers, this idea that the self was sort of assembled before you were even fully aware of it. The book has this striking concept that memory is forming us before we are capable of forming memory ourselves.
It's a huge idea.
Yeah, think about that quiet pulse, that inherited rhythm. The sources say this settles into the body, into the spaces we inhabit, and it often dictates how we recognize safety or danger.
Or even just the way we move without thinking. That's the concept the book calls the echo that begins before us. Sounds abstract, I know.
It does a little.
But its manifestation is completely tangible. This echo isn't some story you can recite about your ancestors. It's more like a gravitational pull, a pattern, or a subtle pressure that's older than any one person.
So where does it come from?
It exists because the body remembers conditions of nourishment, of threat, of tenderness that the thinking mind, our conscious mind, could never witness or label as a memory.
So we're talking about pre-verbal or maybe even pre-conscious knowledge here. But how does the book really differentiate this quiet pulse from, say, just basic personality traits or standard psychological conditioning?
That's a great question, and that's where the analysis gets really insightful. Standard conditioning usually deals with learned responses after we've interpreted something. So, for example, you learned to fear heights because you fell.
Right. Cause and effect.
Exactly. The echo, though, it explains responses that we might call overreactions, or maybe instinct, things that feel totally disproportionate to what's actually happening.
Oh, okay.
The book suggests these are really just expressions of memory in motion. They're rooted in emotional or physical conditions that happened before our personal awareness. For instance, an inherited quickness to withdraw from a conflict, even a minor one. That could be the echo speaking through the muscle memory of survival.
So it's an inherited atmosphere, not a specific remembered event.
That's the key.
I find that incredibly grounding, actually. It suggests that a part of our current struggle isn't necessarily a personal flaw. It could just be an ancient internal attempt at protection that, well, that just hasn't caught up to the present day.
Precisely.
Okay, this next idea. I think we really have to unpack this one. Let's turn that lens inward and talk about the lives we have already lived.
This is the idea that we are fundamentally layered beings. We don't just replace our past versions, the shy child, the fiercely hopeful teenager, the self that felt the world way too sharply.
We don't just outgrow them.
No. Instead, we grow new selves around them. They stay intact, residing in the folds of our later selves. They don't act like, full-blown ghosts, but more like quiet, active presences.
Active presences. And what's the implication of them staying active?
Well, the past versions that learned how to protect us,
Yeah.
they still try to intervene. The child who learned to be cautious because the world felt too loud might still be exerting influence through this internal atmosphere of, say, quiet alertness.
Even when you, as an adult, are just safely ordering a cup of coffee.
Exactly. The book says these earlier selves wait in the half-light of memory, still carrying the original hopes, their fears, their protective strategies. So you might find yourself disproportionately anxious about starting a new project, not because of the project itself, but because that cautious teenage self is stepping forward, convinced this new thing will end in the same kind of failure it once experienced.
Wow. So you're always a competent being navigating the present with this whole crowd of internal companions. That's powerful metaphor. Okay, so moving from that internal landscape,
Yeah.
let's look at how memory settles outside the individual. It's not just stored in our heads.
Not at all. Memory is profoundly relational. It accumulates in rooms, in landscapes, and especially in objects that have been touched and held.
Rooms that hold a breath. That's the chapter title, right?
Yes, and it's a beautiful exploration of this. A room doesn't forget the bodies that move through it. Its memory is built on accumulation, on rhythm, on emotional tone.
So how do you perceive the difference between a room that's just old and a room that is, heavy with memory?
The book is really clear about this. A heavy room isn't heavy from clutter. It's heavy from the accumulated weight of unsaid things, of emotional patterns that were just allowed to dominate the space.
Like what?
A room where conflict was always silenced, for example, or where sorrow was continually suppressed. That room absorbs the energy. On the other hand, a room that feels light might be carrying the steady rhythm of gentleness, of honest exchange.
And that's why absence itself can become a part of a room's breath.
Absolutely. The space where a person used to sit or the silence where their voice used to be, that changes the whole atmosphere.
It makes perfect sense. It's not about the objects, but the emotional climate they witnessed. And this idea of accumulation, it moves seamlessly into the subtle ways memory is transmitted between people across generations.
Through inherited instincts and unspoken gestures, yes.
Talk about the inherited gesture.
The inherited gesture is key. It's memory carried in the physical without a verbal story attached to it. We see it in a child repeating a very specific, unique motion that they never consciously saw a parent do.
Or an adult instinctively comforting someone by mimicking a familiar movement.
The tilt of the head, the way a hand rests on a shoulder, movements they can't even recall witnessing. These are threads carried forward, not by conscious instruction, but by the deeper ancestral memory of the body.
And what was withheld, the absence of care, the absence of clarity in a past generation, that leaves an imprint too, right?
Just as much as presence does. It leaves an imprint in the body's current emotional posture.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, for me at least, tying this external field of memory back to our shared present, the role of animals. Chapter 17. It talks about how they become keepers of the emotional atmospheres that we often try to hide.
Because animals live entirely in the immediate rhythm of sensation and field. They are pure registers of tension and breath.
They don't listen to our stories.
No, they read the emotional currents we generate. If you're experiencing a quiet collapse, the weight of memory has just suddenly become unbearable, your pet isn't interpreting the story of your sorrow. They're sensing the physiological shift. Your breathing, your heart rate, the slight slump in your posture.
So they're archiving us just through proximity. They're the non-judgmental holders of our unspoken history.
Precisely. The book describes them as mirroring the emotional field. A horse that lowers its head and steadies its breath, a cat that settles on your chest during an anxious moment. They are reacting to the sheer weight of the emotional atmosphere you are producing. They hold our history by responding to its pressure.
Forcing us maybe to acknowledge the tension we were trying to ignore.
Yes.
This all suggests a memory that is fundamentally, I guess, unstable and adaptive. Which brings us to the nature of memory itself. It's not static, it's constantly in motion.
It is entirely fluid, and it has to be. As we evolve, our memories must, by necessity, evolve with us. The source material really emphasizes that memory often returns in fragments, and those fragments, they shift shape over time.
Like a moment that once felt like overwhelming, defining fear.
Might return years later with an unexpected tenderness.
And that transformation isn't revisionism, right? It's not about changing the facts.
No, the event itself remains the same, but the memory shifts to reveal a strength or an agency or a support that the immediate experience just didn't allow you to see. That fluidity is the deepest sign of growth.
So the memory is still alive.
It's alive, and it has adapted itself to acknowledge the person you are now. It's incorporated your current perspective into its texture.
And this fluidity means the past doesn't just sit behind us, it reaches forward. Which is where we get into this truly mind-bending concept of cross-temporal memory. Why do certain new situations feel strangely familiar? Or why do you sometimes feel a familiar ache for something that hasn't even happened yet?
This is the concept that the unfinished past lives in the future. The past is not finished simply because it happened chronologically. If there was an unresolved need, an unhealed pattern, or an emotional response that was cut short, its edges stretch along the line of our days.
It presses its emotional shape into future hours.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So if I walk into a new job interview and feel this irrational, sinking dread, even though I'm objectively qualified, is that my unfinished past preparing for a similar kind of rejection it felt years ago?
Exactly. That sinking dread is what the book calls soft anticipation. It's the body recognizing the emotional terrain of what might be coming long before the mind has time to process any narrative details.
The future that knocks gently.
Yes, and it's not necessarily a prediction of a specific event. It's just the continuation of your existing emotional patterns. Your memory is recognizing a pattern and it's preparing you for the emotional cost it required last time.
Which leads right into the weather inside a moment. This idea that emotional memory behaves like weather. It gathers, it thickens, it disperses, and then it returns.
It behaves like a climate, not an artifact. You don't have a single event called tension. You have a climate that promotes it. That tension in a room or anxiety in your chest, it might not be a prophecy. It might just be the ghost of a previous moment that taught the body to react to a very subtle pattern.
A silence that stretches too long, a certain shift in the light.
Yes, and it's coloring the present without a clear, conscious trigger. And the crucial point here, which really defines the entire book, is that this inner weather, it's just seeking presence. It asks only to be noticed.
Not solved, not analyzed away.
Not at all.
That shift from solving to noticing brings us to the core philosophy that grounds this whole book, the stillness beneath the story.
This is the dot beneath what we remember. The book describes this as a presence that exists beneath every single memory, a core that doesn't move, doesn't judge, doesn't record. It's unshaped, untouched by time, and it provides this constant, immutable grounding.
And it's not the self or a personality.
No, it's not consciousness as we usually define it. It's pure presence without narrative. It's what remains when you strip away the story, the interpretation, and all the emotional color.
Okay, so the practical function of this stillness, that's crucial. When you begin to feel this dot, this core steadiness, what happens to those memories that felt so overwhelming?
They don't disappear, but they lose their grip. They shift from being these oppressive burdens to simply being companions. They become quiet knowledge instead of a loud demand.
This is what remains when memory lets go.
That's it. It's the realization that while your history is real, it is not your permanent atmosphere. It allows the inherited pattern, the heavy room, the unfinished past, to exist without controlling the current moment.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the book's real intention is clear. It's not about finding some fixed identity or achieving a final clarity.
No, the intention is about recognizing the absence of story, that pure presence that allows for a deeper honesty in the face of our own layered complexity. The depth of the book comes not from its complicated arguments, but from the simple attention it asks us to pay to the quiet, subtle movements of life.
And ultimately, the source material asserts that memory, in this deep bodily sense, it carries us when we collapse.
It does. It's a quiet knowledge of survival, a ground beneath the chaos that reminds the body of its orientation, even when the mind is totally lost in the story.
Which brings us all the way back to the central invitation of Ghosts of Memory. The work doesn't demand comprehension or analysis or some dramatic change. It just asks for radical noticing, for recognition.
It asks you to feel the quiet architecture of your own life, the echo that precedes you, and the weather that currently resides within.
And if we consider the threads you are currently passing forward, because memory moves through gestures and patterns and atmospheres, not just the stories you tell.
We're left with a final, provocative thought. It really builds on the essence of the entire book. What quiet echo will your daily life leave in the emotional field of others long after you are gone? Simply through the way you hold yourself, the rhythm of your presence, and the way you hold others.
That quiet inheritance.
It's already underway.